Welcome to Alligator Preserves, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McHargue, and I have someone today. My guest today has written a wild ride into the afterlife. His name is Jeff Giles, and we're going to learn a little bit about how his brain works. Jeff, welcome to Alligator Preserves.
People have been asking that for a long time. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of it today.
I think maybe we will. So, Jeff, tell our listeners what you want them to know about you.
Oh boy. Okay. I am a culture writer by trade and editor. I've worked with words in a variety of ways over a long period of time. And I have published a couple of nonfiction books, but this is my first novel.
Okay. And you're coming to us from New Hampshire. Where in New Hampshire?
I live in Keene, which is in the southwest corner. We're about half an hour from Brattleboro,
Okay.
from the Vermont border, basically. Yeah.
All righty. And it hasn't snowed there yet, but it has snowed here in Colorado where I am. So, ha ha. I could probably go.
Yeah. You won the race this year. Yeah.
I could probably go skiing this weekend if I wanted to. So, we're going to talk today about your first novel. This is your debut novel.
Yep.
And I got to ask you about the title, Langley Powell and the Society for the Defense of the Mundane. Now, that's quite a title. Tell me how you came up with this title. I personally, I like really short titles. This is a mouthful. And the fact that you use the word mundane is wonderful. I used to teach seventh grade English, and on Mondays I would give them an M word, and mundane was one of them, and we would discuss mundane. But tell me about how you came up with this title, because it's intriguing.
Yeah. I think I wish I could tell you that I put a lot of concrete thought into the title. I don't really know where it came from. It is a mouthful. I wanted it to be intriguing, just like with the cover. I wanted people to see it and think, well, what is that all about? Um, and I think that's really the best answer I've got. The book is about a man named Langley Powell, and he is a world-renowned debunker of paranormal phenomena. And so he has dedicated his life to the defense of the mundane, and the title is shares a name with Langley's fan club
Okay.
before he dies. Yeah.
All right, before he dies. So I already said that this is a romp into the afterlife. And for those of you
Yeah.
just listening on the podcast, the cover is definitely intriguing. We have a baby grand piano that is somewhere above the clouds, and of course, it factors uh, into the whole story, which
Yes.
again is quite wonderful. So you've written nonfiction. What made you decide to write fiction? And I think I read a little bit about the fact that you started this with a friend, and
I did.
you were going to alternate writing chapters or co-write it, and tell us
Yeah.
about how your writing of this evolved.
Well, I had a coworker who would frequently threaten to haunt me from beyond the grave anytime I upset her. And one day I said, you're half my age. There's no way that I'm going to outlive you. It's going to be the other way around. I will haunt you. And she said, you don't even believe in ghosts. And I said, you're right. That's kind of funny. And so it made me sit and think for a bit about how comical it would be if you just aggressively did not believe that there was an afterlife and then you found out that you were wrong, which led me to start thinking about what kind of person would build their entire persona around not believing in life after death. And that's how I thought of this guy Langley. Um, and yeah, I my trade for a long time has been nonfiction. So I never believed I had a novel in me, but this idea just kept nagging at me. I don't know if you have experienced something similar, but you know, I think sometimes that's sort of the iron test for an idea is if you try to dismiss it and push it away and it just keeps slipping back under your saddle, so to speak. And that's what happened with this. I wanted to read this book. I didn't necessarily think I could write it, but I wanted to read it. So at the beginning of lockdown, I had some time off that I had booked from work, but I obviously wasn't going to be taking the vacation that I had planned. So since I was going to be home, I thought, well, this has been bugging me for a little while now. Let's see if I can really do something with it. And because I was a coward, I reached out to my friend who I'd collaborated with before, and I said, how about if I write a chapter and then you write a chapter and we go back and forth, we try to finish this book. And that lasted for a couple of days. I wrote the first chapter. He wrote a version of the second chapter. And then I responded with, I don't know, two or three or four chapters. And at that point, he said, this is clearly not meant to be a collaboration. This is your story and you need to finish it. And so I spent the rest of that week working on it. And at the end of the week, I thought, I think I have something here. And so weekends for the rest of 2020 were spent uh, polishing it off. And around Thanksgiving of 2020 is when I finished the first draft.
Well, that's a great story. And yes, you asked me if that has ever happened to me. Absolutely. I have characters
Yeah.
and scenes that come to
Yes.
me in my dreams at night, and they scream to be written down somehow. And so you've got to let them, otherwise your head explodes, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a really unique adventure into the afterlife. And by the way, reviewers, because I go on Amazon and I look at reviews, reviewers across the board have indicated their delight in this. They've said things like, well, the cover intrigued me, and so I wanted to know what it was about. And maybe it's not quite my genre, but it seemed like a different kind of read. It really is a different kind of read. I mean, are there any other books out there that kind of farcically, but not totally farcically look into the afterlife? I mean, had you read any others like yours? I mean, this is,
No.
yeah, no. So, so you've done something amazing here. So, what are your thoughts about what lies beyond this mortal realm?
Oh man. I
Are
have
you,
no idea. And I know that there's a whole mythology or whatever you want to call it that's built in this book, and that was really sort of constructed on the fly. I did not. There's a scene in the book when Langley meets Albert Einstein, and Albert explains to him the rules of how the universe works. And it wasn't until Albert started talking that I kind of figured out sort of how I wanted all this to work. I don't know. Anything is possible. I have already admitted on record here that I don't believe in ghosts. So I guess that's a place to start, but certainly anything is possible. I don't know. I don't know what I think. What do you think?
well, I remember when we lived in Leadville. Leadville Laurel is my website. We're in Salida now, but I remember my mother. I'm from the Boston area, and my mother was horrified that I moved to a place like Leadville. At 10,000 feet elevation, and she's anything west of the Mississippi was the Wild West. And I remember when she was getting close to getting ready to pass on. I remember saying something to her about, I'm going to bring your ashes here and bury them in my yard. And she said she would haunt me if I did. And so I said, well, I hope you do. And, she never did. So I don't know. I kind of feel like, we're all made up of star material, right? We're all part of the universe, and
Yeah.
we're all just going to go back into it. And our energy is just going to be out there. And I think all knowledge is out there, and some people have more access to it than others. But that's that's just me. So
I can't disagree with any of that. That sounds good to me.
so in here, I mean, again, the unique idea that when you die and you become a ghost, you continue to live, but in a different kind of world. But you could die again in that other kind of
Yeah.
world. Tell me how that idea evolved, because that was just fascinating to me. It's like you've got your own society and everything in the afterlife.
Yeah. I'm not sure where I just was intrigued by the idea that when you die, you live in a world that looks a lot like the one that you left, and sort of sits on top of it in such a way that you can, if you try, impact people and things in the plane that you left behind. And it's just one stop toward, I don't know what you want to call it, complete enlightenment or what have you. I mean, it's really it is not an original thought. It's what Buddhists believe, right? That you just keep, if you work hard and you're a good person, you get reincarnated as something slightly better than you were before. I think that's sort of the gist of it, with the slight wrinkle that all pet dogs may be reincarnated libertarians.
That's beautiful. And if you believe in that, you just hope you don't come back as a dung beetle, right? Even though dung beetles have a purpose. So,
Yes, they do.
so there.
Absolutely.
Your character, Frank. Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Tell me how he appeared to you. How did you find Frank? Because he is absolutely the best character in the book. They're all great characters, but
I
I love him best.
I do too. I love Frank, and that was why. I mean, he's in most of the book, but there are times that he's not around, and I did that on purpose because I felt like I needed to, I don't know, withhold him from myself to an extent to avoid overusing him. I will tell you that my children decided very quickly that Frank was my self-insert, that, that he was speaking with my voice, and that he was my proxy, and I am Frank and Frank is me. And if that's the case, then I'm flattered by that. I mean, he doesn't come across initially as a very nice person, but he has hidden depths that are revealed slowly over the course of the story. And I don't know where the original idea came from. It just amused me, the idea that this guy Langley would be dropped into an afterlife with no idea what's going on, or where to go, or who to see, or what to do. And his guide is this grumpy little
Child.
government agent. Yes.
Child.
Yeah, like an 8 or 9 year old boy who, he's been dead for a long time, so he's not really a boy anymore. And he spends most of the story on a desperate quest for tacos and beer. That's the kind of guy Frank is. Yeah.
You have so many funny moments in this. I mean, laugh aloud moments. Cyrus tells Langley at one point, "We're all counting on you." And of course, I have the airplane scene in my head. I don't know if that was where you got it. And of course, the secret Dakota ring. I'm thinking of the Christmas Story, and how disappointed he was to learn that
Yes.
that was an advertisement for Ovaltine. So, I mean,
Yeah.
did those things come to you from different, pop culture things?
Yeah. Well, I was born in 74. So, I grew up in the era when, there were still variety shows on television and ads for crap in the back of comic books, and um, metal lunch boxes like the kind that Langley and Frank toted around, the Dakota rings, the X-ray specs, all that stuff very much ties into my youth. That's why I had Langley be born in 1960, so that he could be the right age to, you know, to want to stay up and watch Carson if his favorite magician or whatever happened to be a guest that night. Yeah, I don't know. It's nostalgia plays a huge part in the story, and this stuff is all built on the back of mine. So I guess that makes sense.
Well, I was born in 59, and all the nostalgia, I related to that as well. By the way, I'm wearing a shirt in honor of you. I don't know
Ah,
if you can tell my
I see that.
my Day of the Dead shirt.
That's fantastic.
So, another really, I think, unique perspective on the universe, and of course, we've all heard of the multiverse and different universes and all. You talk about the idea of a spine and
Yes.
a comb, like the spine with all the little tangs, whatever you call those things coming down.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
that must have come to you in a vision or somehow?
Yeah, right when Albert Einstein was talking about it, I was trying to figure out how the hell this would make sense. And so it's kind of how it happened. But the idea is appealing that there is something binding everything together, and it's sort of unknowable and uncontrollable, and you monkey with it at your peril. Um, yeah, I don't know. I maybe I should get I should talk to somebody about all the ideas that came out in this book and find out what they mean to me subconsciously. I don't know, but I do yeah, that idea is appealing to me, that it's just sort of life after life, but everything is connected.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like it. It's somehow encouraging or comforting in a
Yeah.
way, other than the fact that there could be a Cyrus out there trying to, trying to kill me for good. But yeah, again, you must have had so much fun with this. And sometimes we watch comedy shows at night or whatever. It's like, oh my gosh, they must have been, doing something when they were writing this. You've got meat pudding that someone suggests, renaming. You've got Stephen the Mockingbird, a literal
Yes.
windbag. I mean, the literal windbag. Oh my gosh. And then I have to say that one of my favorite lines that would appear kind of throughout the book and always startle me and always make me laugh out loud was with the sound of a fart. So
Yes. Yes.
people have often asked me, like, Laurel, what do you eat or drink at night before you come up with some of your ideas for your great crazy fantasy? Have people asked you that, and do you have an answer for that?
The well, yeah, the fart business is sort of a that I think that's kind of a make or break for some people where the story is concerned. It's definitely it's probably the silliest thing that happens. And the idea is that when you die, there's a transfer of energy. And that is the sound that the transfers of energy make in the universe. And it's an indication of the unpredictable and rude sense of humor that the universe has. This is what Albert Einstein tries to explain to Langley, is that as you're working your way up the spine, periodically you are hit with what he calls droppings from, up above. That if you've ever felt like it's just not your day, and that the universe is mocking you somehow, that's actually what's happening, that the universe has a sick, twisted sense of humor. And so yeah, the whole the every time they these ghosts can kind of teleport sometimes, and every time they do it, they leave with the sound of a fart. Yeah, it amused me, so that's why I put it in there. And when I was writing the book, I envisioned it as something for middle grade readers. That's why there are all these cameos from historical figures, was that I thought it would be fun to make it kind of a history lesson on top of a supernatural fantasy. And the farts are in there kind of for that reason, but also again just because it amused me. Um, and then when I was done, people that I trust told me, no, this is not a book for middle grade readers. This is something else. And so I left it all in.
I'm glad you did, because
Thank you.
again, sometimes things got serious, and sometimes
Yeah.
you just needed to read with the sound of a fart. She was,
Yes. I think
oh my gosh.
I don't know how you feel about narrative rhythm, but I think jokes. I love humor. Humor, I think, is
Obviously,
very, very important. But yeah, but it only gets you so far. If you're not, if all you're doing is joking and you're not really telling a story and you're not trying to say something that matters to you, then I think that the appeal wears off after a
Because
while.
yeah, and you do you that just oh, I walked right into that one, didn't I? You do write about deeper things in there. What a great segue into what I was going to ask you next. When Langley was thinking back to how, Neville was his hero, there's a line in there that talks about looking at the formative experiences in your life from a different angle,
Yeah.
right? He's grown, he's an adult, and you look back at the things that you knew, believed, and all of a sudden some you recognize that it's not what you thought it was. So you have those elements in there as well that makes me wonder, are there things you look back on that
Oh,
you
for sure. Yeah.
anything
I
specific?
think
What made you think of including this idea in there? Did something come to you that like you were thinking, oh boy, I used to think.
my dog has an answer to that question.
Oh, did you just tell your dog to leave? And for those of you who are just listening and not watching, we have a very cute dog back there who's being shooed out of the room because the
The
dog's
mail
barking.
is here. That's why they get very upset when the mail
Oh yeah.
comes.
Oh
So,
yeah. And dogs bark at the mailman because after they bark and the mailman leaves, they have done their job. They scared away the bad guy. So yeah.
I
But
don't know if you can still hear that. I can put them outside if there's
no, I
going to be
don't.
enough noise to bleed through. But
Yeah,
um,
no.
okay,
Yeah.
great.
So back to thinking
So
about, what you used to believe. Maybe you don't
I
anymore.
think probably a lot of that comes from being a parent. I think a lot of that comes from, yeah, the perspective that you have as a child. You see your parents a certain way, or you see the world a certain way, and then you grow up and you realize that there are a lot of things you didn't know, and there were a lot of things you didn't see all of, and it hopefully makes you a much more empathetic and forgiving person. And then separately from that, I think most people can relate to the experience of going back to the house they grew up in after a long time, or going back to the school they attended and thinking, man, it used to seem so much bigger, or
Yeah.
yeah, your perspective. Hopefully, if you're paying attention and you're the slightest bit intellectually curious, your perspective does change over time, and hopefully in ways that enrich the way you see the world. And
Huh.
I tied all that in with this idea that ghosts or people on the plane that Langley and Frank are on, they sort of subsist on memories. They subsist on nostalgia. When they eat, they're
Mm,
they're typically eating food that doesn't exist in the quote unquote real world anymore. And
yeah.
for example, one of the first things that Langley does after he dies is he eats a McDLT, and it takes him back to the 80s, and kind of replenishes the energy that he expended when he died and went to the ghost plane. And so all those things, I think, tie in together. It's important for Langley to go back to the house where he grew up because so much of him is bound up in that spot, and it helps him get calibrated to the plane that he's on now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was good. Huh. So you talk about balance, you talk about the yin yang of life and the fact that we can't have joy without sorrow. You can't
Yeah.
have this is a belief you have that you absolutely cannot understand what happiness is unless you know what sadness is.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think similar to a narrative dynamic, if an author is just beating you over the head with joke after joke for 250 pages, you're gonna stop laughing after a while. And if a book is nothing but a miserable slog, then it's probably going to be pretty tough to get through. And it's just like that in life. I think there are there are things that you don't really appreciate until you don't have them anymore, right?
Yeah.
Uh, there are experiences that you don't really truly value on a fundamental level until they're over. And yeah, I do believe in that. I think you can't you can't understand something without experiencing its opposite, its absence, I guess.
Yeah. No. Do you camp? Do you ever go camping?
I did when I was a young Boy Scout. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where would, yeah.
Yeah, we have frequently, and when you're camping, of course, you do with so little, right? And it always has made me appreciate when I come home, the things that I've taken for granted, like comfort,
Yeah. Yeah.
ease,
Yes.
all those things. A nice warm bed, lack of fear.
Yeah, there was a period for me in my early 20s when I was I was waiting for an apartment to open up. So there were a couple of weeks when I was just kind of bouncing around. And when I moved into the new apartment, I remember thinking, I never thought I would be so glad to have a closet. You know, there are things that I think there are a lot of things that are just kind of they're in the background. You take them for granted until you don't have them anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have to ask you, are you sitting on a balance ball?
I'm not, I'm standing.
Oh, you're standing.
Yeah.
That's funny because I'm on a balance ball, and I often wonder if people wonder why I'm bouncing all around when when I
It's
talk.
just it's good to move.
Good. Yeah, absolutely it is. So I want to ask you, and again, we are talking here for those listening. We're talking with Jeff Giles, who has written his first novel, a very unique romp. Some people have called it zany romp into the afterlife. Langley Powell and the Society for the Defense of the Mundane. Um, there was a passage in here, and I'm wondering if you're getting maybe a little political here. I don't know. So
It's possible.
Cyrus is speaking to Langley, and he says, "What do you know of fairness?" Cyrus retorted, "A man who lived his life coddled by riches and fame. You have no idea what the rest of the world goes through on a regular basis, what I've endured for centuries, and what my people endured for centuries before that." Why'd you put that in there?
Well, obviously there's a central struggle here. There are good guys and there are bad guys, but I didn't I tried to make it so that you could see both points of view and that you could
Yeah,
understand why the villain here is going to such great lengths to do something that could be so incredibly destructive. And it's
yeah,
because he feels like the way life is fairly destructive and unfair. And he has experienced a lot of that unfairness and destruction firsthand. And he feels like it's naive to believe that things should just be allowed to continue as they are. And I think, well, we can get we can get political here. I mean, I think that we're in a period when the there are a lot more people who find authoritarianism a lot more appealing than I would prefer. There are people that find fascist tendencies very appealing right now, and I think that's insane. But I can understand how you think back to when Reagan was elected, and kind of his whole platform was, "It's going to be all right. You don't need to do anything. Let me handle it.
mm,
I will protect you. I will lower your taxes. You don't have to change anything about your life. It's going to get so much better now."
mm.
And that's kind of, I think, what we want to hear. We want to hear that somebody else is going to take care of everything, and we don't have to bother ourselves with fixing any real problems. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't, you probably don't have to read the book that closely to see which side of that line I'm on. There's a line in the book at one point. Somebody says that with some people, every accusation is an admission.
Mm.
I, I think we've seen that borne out on the
Yeah.
political stage over the last 8 years. And then the line about, the universe reincarnating libertarians as dogs who have to depend on everybody for everything. That's also, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's not all about farts. It just isn't. So
but again, I didn't want to make the villain two-dimensional. I didn't want to make him
yeah.
a cartoon. I wanted to try to highlight how somebody could arrive at that conclusion and how they could feel like the only way to make things peaceful and fair and comfortable for everybody is to just let somebody else take over and
Yeah.
refashion everything in their image, or whatever word you want to use.
Yeah. Well, here's a question that you might be a difficult for you to answer, or maybe not. What have you learned about yourself now that you've completed your first novel? I mean, this is a process. I
Yeah.
understand this. And again, you were writing this during COVID, I guess. And
Yeah.
well, are we still in COVID? I
Yes,
don't,
we
I
are.
don't, I don't know that we'll ever be out of it,
I
but
don't think so. Yeah, I think we're in it for the long
yeah.
haul, I think. Yeah.
But
Uh,
has writing this changed you at all? What have you learned?
well, I learned I can do it,
Yeah,
you know.
obviously.
That was a pretty wonderful lesson for me. I the year I turned 40, I started playing guitar in earnest and learned from that that I think most people when they get to a certain age feel like they know who they are, they know what they're good at, and they know what they can't do. And I don't. I think we're often wrong about that. And the the process of fumbling through acquiring a new skill or doing something you've never done before after your, I don't know, 25th birthday or whatever, it can be humbling, but I think that's good. And and so this this was somewhat similar. I never thought that I was gonna write a novel. I didn't think I could do it. I thought, and I don't know what I thought was that much more difficult about writing fiction as opposed to nonfiction, but it was just something I had in my head that this was not part of my creative skill set. Um, and so I really enjoyed finding that out. And now I'm at work on the next novel. So
All right. I was going to ask if this has made you want to dabble more in fiction, and will you use the same characters, or are you going to do something completely different? What speaks to you right now?
the novel that I'm working on right now is completely different. I ended Langley Powell and the Society for the Defense of the Mundane on a very open note. I like those characters. It would be fun to visit with them again. And if not, it's still nice to know that they're out there. But this book takes place among the living. It's a detective story. It's kind of my elevator pitch for it is that it's Chinatown with jokes. It takes place in LA, and the framework is similar in that it deals with a PI who is investigating some people who are very wealthy and powerful. And in the end, his efforts are probably not going to amount to much, but um, it's the journey, not the destination. And so yeah, it's another comedy, but this time it doesn't have anything to do with ghosts. And nobody has farted yet either.
Rats. Oh my goodness. Wow. I love what you said about, anything after 25, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm 65 and I still think I can do whatever I want to do and
yeah.
still working on
You
different
can.
things. And
Good.
I can, and I'm going to, and I'm going to keep doing different things because, otherwise what are we going to do? Sit and watch TV all day? I mean, this life as Langley Powell discovers on top of the grass can be very short.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I think we need to embrace it with all the gusto that we can. So, do you have any advice to anyone else out there, maybe contemplating trying their hands at writing a novel?
I think if you're
We,
contemplating it, you should try it. I think that that's your sign right there. If you're thinking about it, if there's some part of you that thinks maybe I should do this, then you definitely ought to do it. Um, uh, as I was writing it, I thought this this is sellable. I think this is a sellable thing. This is not just some kind of silly little niche. Uh, I don't know. I had it in my head that I wanted to find a publisher for it, even though I know that publishers these days uh, don't necessarily do all the things that
they used to.
many that they used to, or that
Yeah.
many writers believe that they still do.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I had done it,
Yeah.
and so I spent a long time looking for a literary agent, looking for a home for this book, and like I said, publishers these days are maybe not necessarily everything that the public image of them might suggest, but I wanted to say I had done it, and that's the same thing
Yeah.
with this book. I wanted to read it. I wanted to get to the end of the story. I wanted to say that I had finished this thing, and that is its own reward. I think if it's in you, if you think that there might be a story that you're waiting to tell, then you owe it to yourself to follow that thought to its conclusion. And it needs to be its own reward. You need to do it because it's your compulsion, because you have to, because it won't leave you alone until you do. And everything else is just sort of, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but I, I have worked with a lot of writers in my time. And for a very long time now, I've been saying, don't look at site statistics, don't read the comments. You cannot get bound up in that stuff. Uh, However many people read it, however many people buy it, whatever the response is to it when you're done, is not as important as following the impulse to do it in the first place.
To do it in the first place. And again, as I tell all debut authors or debut novelists, once you put a piece of art out there, it's not yours anymore. It
Yeah,
belongs to the
that's very
world,
true.
and it's brave to do that. And what you've said, advice to people. How many people have you heard say, "Oh, I have an idea for a story," or boy, do I have stories to tell," but they never do. So, and it's not easy, right? It wasn't easy, I would imagine, to write this. I mean, you might have had times when you were in the flow and just going. And I guess maybe I should ask, what was the hardest part of completing this?
Well, I think one of the nice things about working in fantasy is that you can do pretty much whatever you want. Uh, Again, I made up the rules on the fly, and once I got to, I don't know, two-thirds of the way through the book, I had to go back and check, like, is it going to work if this happens? Does this really make sense? Do I need to
Yeah,
explain this? And there were some times when I had to make up rules to accommodate the plot that I
right.
had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And I, there was a, yeah, there were times when I felt like, well, maybe I'm over explaining this, and maybe I'm getting too bogged down in rules and regulations of this fictional world. The hardest part was probably the end. I had it in my head that books, stories of this nature, films, television shows, they usually end with like a big battle with a bunch of special effects and explosions and stuff. And I knew I didn't want that. I wanted it to be quieter. I wanted it to be more of an internal thing for the characters. And I didn't want, magic lasers and stuff like that. But the original version of those closing chapters, they were much quieter. They were much shorter. They was much more abrupt, and I had to go back later on and pad it out without giving into that temptation for the big battle with the special effects and everything. And I still don't know if I got it quite right, but I hope I got kind of close to.
Well, your readers are saying that you did, and as far as abrupt endings, I have that tendency as well because
Yeah.
I typically know how I want something to end, and I want to get there, and then all of a sudden you're this
Right.
close. You're so you're like, okay, I have 3 more chapters to go to finish this, and
Yeah.
you just write them all, and then you have people scratching their heads like, what? I want more. And if you have people telling you, I want more, that's a good thing.
That's a great thing.
That's a great
Absolutely.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say that Langley Powell and the Society for the Defense of the Mundane was complete. And I was
Thank you.
satisfied as a reader with how you ended it. I didn't feel it was rushed at all. And you had an amazing balance of humor with intrigue and thoughtfulness and moments that made me reflect back on some things and yeah, there was a lot of reminiscing that I felt in this book as well, and so I thank you for having the idea and actually getting it done and getting it out there. So do you have any shout outs to anyone?
Anyone. Oh my God.
Anyone?
Anyone in the world? Do I have any shout outs?
Well, obviously
Uh,
the person you started writing this with, right? And learned
oh yeah.
that it was yours.
That's my buddy Brian Boone, who ultimately ended up becoming my editor at Humorous Books. He was there at the beginning and then was just a wonderful cheerleader for all the years that I spent trying to find an agent. Um, I don't know how many times you've talked about this process on your show, but it's not pleasant.
I'm going through it. I'm going through it right now. As a matter of fact, I'm going through it right now with my latest novel.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
it's
Every so
not fun.
often, no, it isn't. Every so often he would email me and say, "How goes the search?" And I'd say, "Well, I've sent out some pitches. I haven't heard anything." And you need to be, I don't know if this is true for you. I needed to be in the mood. I needed to be in a space where I was okay with either not getting a response or hearing no, which is really, that I think that you talked about putting something out in the world and it doesn't belong to you anymore, and you have to be ready for people to respond to it. You have to build up elephant skin. And it's
Yes.
sort of like that with trying to find a literary agent. You just have to put yourself out there for rejection over and over again. And so I didn't send out emails to agents every day. I would do it periodically, probably not as aggressively as I should have, just because it sucks.
Well, and
But
ultimately, you get, like as I have, you publish it yourself and you get it out there. You don't have to wait a year and a half or 2 years for your
right.
work to have an audience, an appreciative audience. And yeah, so kudos to you on just saying, I'm getting it out there because I wanted to read it. You wanted to read it when you wrote it. And so, there are people out there who want this.
Yeah, I wouldn't anybody who decides to self-publish, I think that's a great decision. I self-published my first book accidentally, actually. That's how easy it is to self-publish through Amazon.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, and with this, I really wanted to find a publisher and I did, but there's no there's no right path. Like maybe for some people there's still sort of a stigma attached to self-publishing, but I think that that's fading and it deserves to continue to fade.
Yeah.
There's you know
So who else helped you with this? Family? Did your family read this? Anyone in your family read it?
Yeah,
How old are your kids?
they are 19 and 17.
Did they read it?
Probably about half of it. I don't think, yeah, I don't think either one of them have finished it, but my wife did. She was a great cheerleader. I think for anybody who's married, the idea of your spouse sitting on the couch for 6, 7, 8 hours at a stretch every weekend working on a novel is, if you're in a relationship where you're lucky enough to have that kind of understanding, then you've you're living right.
Yes, well, I will say that my husband was the first person to read my 81,000 word novel that um, I have recently completed too. And he was the first person to give me brutal feedback. And he was afraid too. He was afraid. So for again, here's a tip for you writers out there. If you are giving you work to someone, as you know, I want feedback, tell me if it's
Yeah,
good. You don't want them to tell you this is great, this is the greatest thing I've ever written, you don't have to do anything. You want them to
100% agree.
be like my husband was, brutal with saying this doesn't make sense. If I see the word gasp one more time, I'm going to throw it across
Right,
the room.
right. Yes.
You need more here, you need less here, and what is going on here. You need someone to do that. And again, you mentioned elephant skin. You've got to have a
Yeah.
tough skin, and because otherwise, if you can't take feedback, then you're not going to be putting out your best work into the world. I don't think that's my personal opinion. So yeah.
Could not agree more. And I think that's the inclination that most people have when you give them
Yeah.
something. They feel like they owe it to you to only tell you good things, and that is not
No,
what
not
you're looking
helpful.
for.
It's not helpful.
Because there's stuff you can't see because you're too
Yeah.
close to it. And that's exactly you're living right too, if you're
Yeah.
married to somebody who is comfortable enough to provide you with brutal feedback. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, 41 years. And he did when he finished it, he looked at me and he gave me a look, and I was thinking, oh boy, here it comes. And I had to kind of pry it out of him. And it took a couple days for him to tell me everything. So oh,
But it
anyway.
sounds like you're glad that he did. It
Oh,
sounds
I'm
like there was
so yeah. Because he was
actionable
right.
feedback. Yeah.
He's right. Yeah, actionable feedback. You're right. And what I ended up with was much better than what I started with. Well, Jeff Giles, debut author of your first novel, Langley Powell and the Society for the Defense of the Mundane, a zany romp into a very unique look at the afterlife, with some philosophical things in there and a lot of fun in there. Readers out there, I think, if you're looking for Christmas gifts, birthday gifts,
Yes.
gift for yourself, you want to escape this world for a little bit.
Perfect.
Here's an escape for you. Jeff, thank you so much for being on Alligator Preserves. And listeners out there, you can find links with links, yeah, links and photos on my website at leadvillelaurel.com. And Jeff, be in touch and let me know when your new novel comes out. Okay.
Thank you. I will.
Alrighty. You have a wonderful rest of the season, and thanks for visiting with me.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me.
You're welcome. Bye.